This dude is just like low-key harassing me. Like, should I get a restraining order?
Jack then replying to all this and saying she ends with, should I get a restraining order? Well, one of us showed up to the other's house tonight and it wasn't me. And saying the harassing you claim I've been doing is documenting recent examples of you stealing creators' content, stealing jokes, and failing to provide transformative commentary. Obviously, it struck a nerve, but wow, doxing me was not on my bingo card. There is no reality where you're in the right here. And then regarding the claims that she doesn't even know how to dox, he said, you posted a video tonight of you outside our home for your 5 million plus followers to see while my wife and I were inside. I can't make it any simpler than that. If that's not doxing, why did you delete it? And all of this has unsurprisingly spawned tons of responses online. A few defending her, but largely it seems like people are on Jack's side. And saying things like, her saying I found his address on Google was nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to tell her audience, here's where you can find the information. Sniperwolf is going to get somebody hurt. As well as, I don't care if you're a fan of Sniperwolf or not, Jack did not deserve to be doxed over what amounts to YouTube drama. Fuck out of here, man. And personally, my opinion here, I used the words in the beginning, I think this is disgusting, it is dangerous, and it is reckless. This is just something you do not do. This crosses a line. In my opinion, when she says there was no ill intent, I just wanted to talk, that sounds like bullshit to me. Or you just want to talk? DM. You posted all this, including the front of his home, publicly. At the very least, this was an intimidation tactic. At the very worst, you were hoping that something escalates. And her posting after all the big reactions to her story, like joking about the incident, saying, we show up to your house, what do you do? I feel like that shows she really doesn't understand what she did was fucked up. Also, that she likely doesn't expect to be held accountable, which is a big aspect of this story because not only did Jack and others online say she needs to be deplatformed, but that was something that Jack reiterated in a video that he uploaded to YouTube. But here's the thing, and YouTube, feel free to prove me wrong. I am 99.5% sure YouTube's not going to do a fucking thing. And as far as why, it's because she's one of their golden creators. She was even their keynote speaker at VidCon and they were gushing about her on Twitter. And the truth is, this has gotten to such a point, they can't claim, oh, we didn't see it. And so understand, if there is, as I expect, a lack of an action, that is an action. When you don't send a message, that is a message. And unfortunately, the one that YouTube may be sending here is a dangerous one. But hey, that is the story, some of my personal opinion. And now I pass the question off to you, whether you agree or you disagree with me. What are your thoughts here and why? And then over the weekend, we saw a lot happen between Gaza and Israel. Giving a quick update to the numbers, we have the total number of dead across both sides now in the thousands, with more than 1,400 Israelis and at least 2,750 Palestinians killed. And what's concerning is that number is already high and there hasn't even been a ground invasion yet. There's also, of course, the risk of the conflict escalating as conflicts have started breaking out in the West Bank. And that's on top of the reports that Israel had targeted the airfields of neighboring countries that it believes Iran is using to bring in arms to groups like Hezbollah. You also had the continued airstrikes into Gaza while rockets flew into Israel. Also, one of the biggest developments was the announcement by Israel that for about half a day there would be a safe passage corridor into southern Gaza. However, even that ended up causing issues. There were claims that Israel ended up targeting the corridor anyways, while on the other side, Hamas was accused of blocking it off and setting off explosives to stop it. But either way, it was horrible for everyday Gazans who were just trying to get out of the northern part of the territory where the worst fighting is expected to happen. Though that said, there are some efforts to relieve them. With yesterday, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken telling reporters Rafah will be open, adding we're putting in place with the United Nations, with Egypt, with Israel, with others, the mechanism by which to get the assistance in and to get it to the people who need it. And notably, this opening would allow humanitarian aid to be sent to Gaza from Egypt and let the roughly 500 to 600 American citizens living in Gaza out, alongside many others with foreign passports. And on top of this, Egypt and the U.S. agreed that there would be a temporary ceasefire to make this happen. Except, of course, there was one big issue. You kind of need Israel and Hamas to also agree, and neither did, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office issuing a statement this morning that no such ceasefire has taken place. That was shortly followed by Egypt saying that no aid has managed to get through. Though you also have Israel at least saying that a safe passage corridor would continue to exist to try and let Gazans get to the south. And then as far as the online conversations, this continues to be an extremely polarizing situation, with there being a range of opinions and claims like this is a genocide by Israel or that Hamas was solely to blame for outsized death tolls because it was using civilian residential areas to launch attacks. So with all of this, the reactions have not been limited to just the internet. I mean, one notable thing was the call by Hamas leadership for a day of rage last Friday, something that actually led to many schools and events being shut down over fears that people or groups would take up that call. Though largely, we ended up just kind of seeing bomb threats and large protests. So we saw many authorities still being cautious. I mean, it even led to places like France largely being shut down. But also, there have been attacks on people. In Germany, Jewish homes and businesses were targeted, with many shops getting their windows smashed in and stars of David being painted on doors, which is a clear callback to the 1930s when the Nazi Party encouraged things like that. Meanwhile, in London, a man arrived at a pro-Palestine rally to carry an Israeli flag and was attacked for it before police managed to intervene. Which, on that note, many pro-Palestine protests across the world have been absolutely massive. I also want to make sure to mention that there have been extremely violent reactions too. In northern France, a teacher was stabbed to death and 3 others injured in what authorities are calling a terror attack, with the attacker reportedly being a 20-year-old Russian man from one of Russia's majority Muslim republics. And then possibly one of the worst examples of how this conflict has spilled over is what happened in Chicago, with it being reported that a young 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy was killed after his landlord barged into his family home, murdered him with a knife, and severely wounded his mother. Police right now are treating this as a hate crime. And this young boy's death has gotten a lot of attention, with even President Biden talking about it this weekend and saying, the child's Palestinian Muslim family came to America seeking what we all seek, a refuge to live, learn, and pray in peace. And saying this horrific act of hate has no place in America and stands against our fundamental values. Freedom from fear for how we pray, what we believe, and who we are. And it's because of the threats and incidents like this that agencies all over the US and world really are on edge right now, especially as there is a real fear that these will hardly be the last kinds of things we see. And then, in entertainment and drama news, we gotta talk about this Dylan Dennis, Logan Paul, Nina Agdal situation. Because it finally happened after months and months of just shit-talking and slut-shaming. Dylan Dennis finally entered the ring and fought Logan Paul, though notably not before he cut Logan's face with a microphone in a promotional event before the fight. And while in the fight, Logan easily handled Dylan all 6 rounds, it technically ended in the 6th round with a few seconds left via disqualification. And that's because in addition to things earlier in the fight, like Dylan lying on the ground and showing Logan where he wants it, later on in the fight, once he had done such a terrible job, the crowd had actually turned against him and in favor of Logan for the most part. He decided to try to do some jujitsu on Logan, which also was embarrassing because he failed both times. One time, it just looked like he was trying to top Logan off in the middle of the ring. And then the last time, he just ended up like falling or getting thrown to the ground and almost getting hit with a hammer fist in his face. At which point, security then flooded the ring. Dylan, I guess, wanted to also try and fight a security guard, which I guess that's what he was saving his punches for. And so as places like CBS Sports explained, Paul was moments away from a unanimous decision win before Dennis's shenanigans forced a disqualification. And while most outlets said basically the same thing, CBS went even further and said it was barely more competitive than if Logan had fought a punching bag, saying Dylan was all misfit, no boxing. And Twitter has largely agreed, though of course none of that has stopped Dylan from talking shit online, continuing to slut shame Nina, also saying he's appealing the disqualification. But in general, you know, it was all just kind of clown behavior. And personally, the only thing I kind of wonder at this point is I wonder how much money he made Logan Paul. I'm so interested what the pay-per-view numbers are going to be because, you know, Dylan, I guess, got a flat fee and Logan gets back-end points. But also, on the previous note of there being an appeal, YouTuber KSI also said he's going to be appealing the decision because he fought boxer Tommy Fury and it was close. Some have described it as a robbery. I would say if it's not a robbery, I didn't agree with the decision. Personally, based off of how things looked and also the numbers, I thought KSI won the first 3 rounds. Tommy got the last 3 rounds, but also Tommy had a point deduction because he kept punching KSI in the back of the head. And so for me, and it turns out many others, I thought KSI won. But also, you know, I'm just some schmuck watching the fight. I'm not a professional judge. And so I also kind of think when a YouTuber is going against a professional boxer, you need to think of it as like someone going against the champ. If you even think it's remotely close, you should expect to lose. You often got to make it undeniable or you put their ass on the ground. But hey, if you watch the fights, I'd love to know your thoughts. And then for any of you focused on getting your business off the ground, creating a place to share your homemade goods, or even a personal blog, I got a great solution for you. And it comes from, and I want to thank the fantastic sponsor of today's show, Squarespace. You know, I've been partnering with Squarespace for years now, and I have to say, it is just so easy. There's nothing to install, patch, or update ever. And creating a beautiful website with Squarespace's Fluid Engine is so easy. You just drag things where you like, no coding necessary. And if you need a starting point, Squarespace has a bunch of great professional templates. Hell, you could even sell custom merch easily. Squarespace handles all the production and shipping. Plus, with Squarespace, you get access to all their marketing tools and analytics and their award-winning customer care team via email or live chat 24/7. So go check it out, see why others love it, see why you're gonna love it, and start your free trial today over at squarespace.com/Phil. And when you realize you made one of the easiest and smartest decisions, just make sure you enter an offer code Phil to get 10% off your first purchase. And then, should we stop categorizing people by race? That is the question people are asking right now regarding the US Census, because a growing segment of experts and activists are calling upon the US Census Bureau to stop categorizing people by race. And this because over the past year, they've invited the public to give feedback on potential changes to the 2030 census, including to questions on race and ethnicity. And so Carlos Hoyt, a psychotherapist and author who consults at schools and universities on the topic, is leading an effort to remove or at least reform that section altogether. Right? And his fundamental point is that race, concepts like white, black, Asian, Arab, etc., are not real in any biological sense. And actually, according to the science, he's 100% right. The overwhelming majority of geneticists agree that racial categories are an extremely weak proxy for genetic variation. And historians have actually actually noted that the concept of race hasn't always existed, and when it has, it changed repeatedly. Some scholars date racism as far back as the ancient world, while others claim it actually is a modern or a late medieval invention. But you see, at least most agree that so-called scientific racism, or more accurately, pseudo-scientific racism, took off in the 18th century. Right, that being the use of supposedly scientific methods to divide people into distinct races, with the idea being used to justify slavery, colonialism, war, genocide, and all that stuff. But for nearly just as long, and especially since the early 20th century, thinkers have pushed back against the pseudoscience, with figures like W.E.B., Du Bois, and Franz Boas arguing that race is just a social construct. And over the next several decades, developments in genetics, biology, anthropology, and other disciplines increasingly cast doubt on the concept. That is, until 2003 with the completion of the Human Genome Project, and that really put the final nail in the coffin. And so now people like Hoyt argue that the rest of